Welcome to Community Radio Networks. Let's get this week started, and it is a very special week. Do you know why? It is the 24th week of the 24th year of this century. Today, ladies and gentlemen, is the 10th of June. Wishing you all a lovely Monday. Let's tell you all the information that you need to take on the day today, right here on Community Radio Networks, and we'll start with the world news. This is Community Radio Networks, the world news, read by Shabnam Madgil. Secretary of State Antony Blinken pushing for a breakthrough on President Biden's ceasefire proposal when he reaches the Middle East today on his 8th diplomatic mission to the region since the Israel-Hamas war in Gaza began in October. Currently, he was accompanying President Biden in France on a state visit timed to the 80th anniversary of the D-Day invasion during World War II, flying from Paris to Cairo to meet Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and other officials before traveling to Israel, Jordan, and Qatar. He will then go to Italy to join President Biden at the summit for the Group of Seven advanced economies. In all his meetings, he will emphasize the importance of Hamas accepting the proposal on the table, which is nearly identical to one Hamas endorsed last month, and discuss how the ceasefire proposal would benefit both Israelis and Palestinians. And meanwhile, an Israeli Special Forces operation in central Gaza this weekend retrieved 4 living hostages captured on the 7th of October last year. More than 270 Palestinians were killed, according to the Hamas-run health ministry, which does not differentiate between civilians and combatants. And this daytime operation involved storming 2 multi-story apartment buildings 650 feet apart, where hostages were held separately. Israel says special forces came under heavy fire, including from rocket-propelled grenades, with 1 Israeli officer killed. And among the hostages was Noah Argamani, filmed taken into Gaza on a motorcycle in a highly publicized video. About 120 hostages are believed to still be in Gaza, including 43 presumed dead. More than 37,000 Palestinians have been killed in Gaza since the start of this war. And separately, opposition leader Benny Gantz has resigned from Israel's war cabinet after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu failed to set forth a post-war plan for Gaza. Netanyahu's coalition still holds enough seats to remain in power. And it is Vice President Harris who is mourning the Palestinians who were killed in this successful Israeli hostage rescue operation this weekend during an address delivered on Saturday. The U.S. is urging Israel to operate differently to avoid the loss of innocent lives. And the Israel Defense Forces accused the Qatari regime-owned Al Jazeera news organization of employing a Hamas terrorist whose family held 3 of the hostages that were freed in Saturday's IDF raid. Israeli War Cabinet member Benny Gantz, who has resigned from Benjamin Netanyahu's government, delivered a blow to the Prime Minister, who's been celebrating the rare rescue of hostages held in Gaza. And we do have also a commander of Israeli Army's Gaza division who has resigned. Palestinian president is seeking an emergency UN Security Council session after the Nusrat massacre. And the World Food Programme is pausing delivery of Gaza through the U.S.-built pier. Yemen's Houthi have damaged 2 commercial vessels in missile attacks in the Gulf of Aden in the last 24 hours as part of the militia group's ongoing campaign against international ocean shipping. And in a string of interviews that aired across major cable and broadcast networks yesterday, White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan urging both sides of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict to agree to President Joe Biden's 3-phase to end the war in Gaza. Thousands of people from cities across the country gathered outside the White House to protest the Biden administration's policies towards the Israel-Hamas war. Many dressed in keffiyehs and red clothes to symbolize what they say is a red line that Israel crossed. Hundreds of protesters held a red banner that stretched around the White House, urging President Biden to change his approach to the war in Gaza. President Biden traveled to a World War I cemetery in France in a visit seen as a jab at his predecessor, Donald Donald Trump, who in 2018 skipped that visit, reportedly calling American war dead losers. The 81-year-old Democrat is set to face Trump, the 77-year-old Republican, later this year in the presidential election that commentators predict will subject U.S. democracy to a severe test. And on the last day of his 5-day tour, President Biden visited the sprawling Ain-Marne American Cemetery and Memorial near the village of Beaulieu in northern France. The cemetery contains the graves of 2,289 war dead, most of whom fought in the vicinity and in the Marne Valley in 1918. During the visit, he saluted military officers standing beside a floral wreath at the bottom of the steps of a cemetery chapel. And President Biden and former President Trump are basically tied nationally and in battleground states. We have independent presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who's reached 15% or more in 3 approved national polls. Former President Trump is scheduled to be interviewed by New York probation officials this morning, a required step before his July sentencing in this criminal hush money case. He will do the interview via computer video conference from his residence at Mar-a-Lago Club in Palm Beach, Florida. And one of his lawyers will be present for the interview. People convicted of crimes in New York usually meet with probation officials without their lawyers, but the judge in Trump's case, Juan Merchant, said in a letter that he would allow his lawyers a presence. The Supreme Court is set to rule this month on 2 major abortion cases with significant nationwide implications as the justices revisit the issue for the first time since overturning Roe v. Wade. The 2022 decision to end the right to obtain an abortion sent shockwaves across the country, leading to a new wave of state abortion restrictions and emboldening anti-abortion activists to seek other ways to restrict that practice. Hunter Biden's defense team is expected to wrap up arguments in his federal firearms trial in Delaware today, and the jury could begin deliberating by the end of the day, barring any dramatic moves like a last-minute decision by Biden to testify on his own behalf. With just months to go until the next presidential election, the Southern Poverty Law Center recently released its annual Year in Hate report. Researchers documented the highest number of active anti-LGBTQ+ and white nationalist groups that have ever been recorded. Overall, the SPLC documented 1,430 hate and anti-government extremist groups, it said, comprising an organizational infrastructure that upholds white supremacy in the United States. And it was Las Vegas in Nevada, which is known for its casinos, live entertainment, and being hot. The last one especially true this week, since the area broke multiple heat records last week. Data updated by the National Weather Service showed that Las Vegas County broke records for the earliest day with a temperature over 110 degrees, and the daily max temperature, which is 111, and the daily warm low temperature at 85. An excessive heat warning still in effect for the Las Vegas area. And while Las Vegas has been shattering heat records, it's not the only location in the Southwest dealing with extreme heat. Upper-level ridging over California and the Southwest helped spawn excessive heat warnings and advisories over parts of central and southern California. Texas Governor Greg Abbott insists that President Biden's executive order to combat the border crisis is making illegal crossings worse. The White House announced executive action last week to crack down on crossings once they reach a certain limit, with the move coming just months ahead of the November election. The Biden administration is considering a proposal to protect migrant spouses of U.S. citizens from deportation and allow them to work in the country legally. And it is the number of migrants that was caught illegally crossing the U.S.-Mexico border that has dropped, according to a new Biden administration policy deterring some illegal immigration. U.S. Border Patrol arrested around 3,100 people crossing illegally, down roughly 20% from the days before. And Secretary of Homeland Security Alejandro Mayorkas defended the Biden administration's new asylum restrictions and consequences for migrants who cross the border illegally in an interview. U.S. and Canadian officials are investigating after a 689-foot ship collided with an underwater object and began taking on water in Lake Superior, according to the U.S. Coast Guard. The agency responded after this bulk carrier sent a report that it was experiencing flooding as it traveled southwest of Isle Royale in Lake Superior. The Biden administration is close to finalizing a treaty with Saudi Arabia that would commit the U.S. to help defend the Gulf nation as part of a deal aimed at encouraging diplomatic ties between Riyadh and Israel. The possible deal, widely telegraphed by U.S. and other officials for weeks, is part of a wider package that would include a U.S.-Saudi civil nuclear pact, steps towards the establishment of a Palestinian state, and an end to the Israeli aggression in Gaza, where months of ceasefire efforts have failed to bring peace. Citizens across the European Union are currently voting in the European Parliament elections to choose direct representatives for the supranational legislative body. Latvian Prime Minister and the European Commission Vice President were among the first voters in a polling station in the Latvian capital of Riga. The European Parliament is one of EU's three main political institutions, along with the European Council, which represents national governments of the 27 member states, and the European Commission, the bloc's Brussels-based executive arm. French President Macron dissolved the lower house of parliament yesterday and called for snap elections later this month after projections showed the far-right National Rally Party defeating pro-European centrists in elections to represent the country in the European Parliament. France was one of the 21 countries voting yesterday in European Parliament elections, and the final group to determine the makeup of the Parliament's 720 members elected every 5 years. Macron announced he was dissolving Parliament and called these snap legislative elections after the far-right trounced his centrist alliance in the EU polls. And German Chancellor Olaf Scholz's Social Democrats crashed to their worst-ever result in European Parliament elections, falling to third place behind the far-right Alternative for Germany. Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni's far-right party won European elections in Italy with a strong 28% of the votes, boosting her leadership at home and consolidating her kingmaker role in Europe. Meloni's Brothers of Italy party confirmed its status as the country's most popular party, even improving its performance from the 26% it won in the 22 general elections. And Prime Minister Donald Tusk's centrist civic coalition has won the European elections in Poland, according to these official figures. Iga Swiatek made clear that she's a big fan of the TV series Friends. She even got a chance to hit some tennis balls with actress Courtney Cox, who played Monica Geller on the show shortly before the start of the French Open. So on Saturday evening, a few hours after winning her fourth championship at the Roland Garros and major trophy number 5 overall, she was wearing custom-made white sneakers that her shoe sponsor stenciled with the words, "The one where she wins her 5th Grand Slam," in all capital letters, a nod to the names given to the sitcom's episodes. And Carlos Alcaraz fought back to defeat Alexander Zverev in a 5-set French Open final yesterday and become the youngest man to win Grand Slam titles on all 3 surfaces. He became this youngest man, and the two battled for 4 hours, 19 minutes. But Alcaraz came through 6-3, 2-6, 5-7, 6-1, 6-2. His 2024 French Open title sits alongside his triumphs at the 2022 US Open and last year's Wimbledon. Nearly 90 countries and organizations, half from Europe, have confirmed attending the Swiss-hosted Ukraine Peace Summit over the weekend, despite Russia's refusal to participate. And President Biden said he had reached an agreement with French President Macron on the use of profits from frozen Russian assets to help Ukraine. Ukraine's military said it had destroyed one of Russia's newest and most advanced fighter jets in a drone strike on a military base deep inside Russia. And Ukraine may keep some of the F-16 fighter jets it's set to receive from its Western allies at foreign bases to protect them from Russian strikes. Belgium, Denmark, and the Netherlands and Norway have committed to provide Ukraine with over 60 US-made F-16 fighter jets to help it fend off Russian attacks. President Zelensky has dismissed Russian statements regarding the capture of a village in Ukraine's northeastern Sumy region. And Russia has put the former Ukrainian Prime Minister Yulia Tymoshenko on its wanted list. A massive crater in Russia can now be seen from space and continues to expand due to climate change. Dubbed the gateway to hell, the Batagaika crater is a 200-acre-wide, 300-foot-deep hole in the Yana Highlands of Siberia that was created by the release of tons of previously frozen methane caused by melting permafrost. Iran's Guardian Council approving the country's hardline parliament speaker and 5 others to run in the country's June 28th presidential election following a helicopter crash that killed President Ibrahim Raisi and 7 others. The council again barred former President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, the firebrand populist known for the crackdown that followed his disputed 2009 re-election, from running. And the council's decision represents the starting gun for a shortened 2-week campaign to replace Raisi, a hardline protege of Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, once floated as a possible successor for the 85-year-old cleric. The World Food Programme Executive Director Cindy McCain warning of the worsening humanitarian crisis in Sudan. Sudan has the real possibility of becoming the world's largest humanitarian crisis, she said. Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to the World News on Community Radio Networks. South Korea has vowed to blast unbearable noise at North Korea for the first time since 2018 after Pyongyang sent more sewage-filled balloons over the border. Seoul's National Security Council said it'll restart loudspeaker broadcasts of anti-North Korean propaganda after 330 balloons dropped 15 tons of rubbish in South Korea throughout the weekend. 3 waves of these sewage-filled balloons filled with manure, cigarette butts, scraps of cloth, batteries, and waste paper have been sent into the South since May. South Korea stopped its loudspeaker broadcasts in 2018 during a brief period of diplomacy with Pyongyang when the country signed an agreement to ease tensions. And when they last were active, the broadcast played K-pop songs, weather reports, and attacks on North Korea's leadership. Coming from multiple speakers stacked in large racks, South Korea's military also claims the sound can travel more than 12.4 miles into North Korea. The Philippines said it will continue to maintain and supply its South China Sea outposts without seeking permission from any other nation, dismissing Beijing's demand to do so as absurd nonsense and unacceptable. Prime Minister Modi is thanking world leaders for attending his oath ceremony and reaffirmed India's commitment to its neighborhood-first policy and Sagar vision. Hours after taking oath, Prime Minister Modi met with the leaders of neighboring countries who attended the grand swearing-in ceremony in the national capital yesterday and said India would continue to work for the peace, progress, and prosperity of the region. Leaders of several of India's neighborhood countries, including Maldives President Mohammad Muizu, Nepal Prime Minister Pushpa Kamal Dahal Prachanda, and Sri Lankan President Ranil Wickremesinghe attended Prime Minister Modi's swearing-in ceremony. After the event, Prime Minister Modi met with the visiting leaders in the Rashtrapati Bhavan. And he also was sworn in earlier as India's Prime Minister for the 3rd term in a grand ceremony at the Presidential Palace in Delhi. The leader of the BJP took his oath, saying he would do right to all manners of people without affection or ill will. Mr. Modi's BJP-led NDA won the general election with 293 seats, a much lower margin than predicted by the exit polls. And the election saw a resurgence of India's opposition, which won 234 seats. Tight security was in place in Delhi, which was declared a no-fly zone with more than 2,500 police officers deployed around the venue. Speaking as he was sworn in by President Draupadi Murmu, he said he would uphold the sovereignty and integrity of India and govern with true faith and allegiance to the Constitution. A council of ministers of Mr. Modi's new cabinet also sworn in during the ceremony, and the 73-year-old is only the second Indian leader to win a 3rd consecutive term after the country's first Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru. Prime Minister Modi was sworn in, and the NDA government now formally in office for its 3rd consecutive term at the centre. And the Prime Minister Modi's Cabinet 3.0 brings a wealth of experience, expertise, and vision and includes 30 cabinet ministers, 5 ministers of state with independent charge, and 36 ministers of state. Includes representation from all corners of the country as well as social groups. It has 27 ministers from other backward classes, 10 from scheduled classes, 5 from scheduled tribes, and 5 from minorities. And a record 18 senior ministers will be heading ministries. Modi's Cabinet 3.0 includes 43 ministers who have served 3 terms or higher in Parliament, with 39 having been ministers. And a celebratory fireworks had ignited a blaze at Indore's BJP office during Prime Minister Modi's oath. And this incident took place at 9:15 p.m. yesterday in Indore's Sanyogitanganj area during the swearing-in ceremony of the new government in in New Delhi. We also do have over the next 2 days a heavy to very heavy rainfall expected in Konkan and Goa, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, and many coastal and north interior regions. The Indian Meteorological Department today said the southwest monsoon has progressed further into parts of the North Arabian Sea and Maharashtra. Conditions are favorable for the monsoon to advance into more areas of the North Arabian Sea, South Gujarat, and additional parts of Maharashtra over the next 2 days. And the heat wave conditions likely in some pockets of Jammu division, Punjab, Haryana, Chandigarh, Delhi, Jharkhand, and Odisha during the next 5 days. Pakistan coach Gary Kirsten defended the playing surface at New York's T20 Cricket World Cup venue yesterday following his team's defeat to India in a low-scoring contest. India were bowled out for 119, their lowest ever score against Pakistan in a T20 game, but won by 6 runs after their rivals fell just short. All 5 games at the Nassau County International Cricket Stadium, which features a drop-in square, laid a month before the tournament, have been low-scoring affairs. There had been criticism of the surface after India's win over Ireland last week, with former Zimbabwe international and ex-England team director Andy Flower calling it dangerous because of the uneven bounce. But yesterday's wicket, while hard to score on, provided only the occasional ball which popped off a length, and Kirsten said it had made for an interesting game. Last week's complaints led the International Cricket Council to accept that the wickets hadn't been up to standards for the opening games at the venue. 3 games remain at the venue, with the last coming on Wednesday when India face co-hosts USA. The Pakistan Cricket Board has commenced the demolition of its main secretariat building at the Gaddafi Stadium in Lahore as part of extensive renovations to meet the International Cricket Council's ICC requirements for hosting next year's ICC Champions Trophy, tentatively scheduled for February to March. And South African skipper Aiden Markram admitted that batting on a slow and fresh Nassau County pitch has been tough and wanted his side to revisit the strategies to score runs on the surface in New York. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif offered a brief congratulations to his counterpart Narendra Modi on his re-election in India a week after the results came in, almost. And in a prehistoric first, Israr Kakkar, a student from Balochistan, has been elected as president of the Oxford Union. He's the 3rd Pakistani and first from Balochistan to hold this prestigious position. The Oxford Union, founded in 1823, is one of the oldest and most esteemed debating societies in the world. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all I have in the world news for you, but I do have your financial news coming up in just a minute.
The world.
Today is Monday, the 10th of June, and as we get this week started, and as I've mentioned earlier, it is the 24th week of the 24th year of this century. So it's a very special week. Let's get it started for you financially. U.S. equity futures moved lower this morning while the dollar powered higher and Treasury yields held steady as investors brace for a crucial week for markets while navigating the fallout from the European Parliament elections over the weekend. Stocks had ended yesterday's session modestly lower. Not yesterday's, Friday's session modestly lower, but booked gains for the week following a mixed series of labor market data that culminated with a much stronger than expected May employment report, which showed 272,000 new jobs added and a re-acceleration in average hourly earnings. Stocks closed another week near record highs last week as the latest jobs report showered this U.S. labor market that's cooling, but not a pace that economists find very concerning. And investors are on edge this week as Federal Reserve officials prepare to signal how many interest rate cuts are still likely this year. Most market watchers believe policymakers will dial their expectations back. The question is, by how much? Apple's Worldwide Developers Conference event kicks off today from the company's headquarters in Cupertino, California, with a keynote by CEO Tim Cook, one of the most anticipated Apple events in years. WWDC 2024 expected to serve as the launch point for the company's big push into generative AI. Wall Street is eager to find out what Apple's been cooking up over the past few months as its rivals have begun rolling out, or in some cases rolling back, their own generative AI offerings. Apple has been largely on the sidelines of the AI conversation, save for a few fleeting mentions during earnings calls and the like. It's the moment of truth for Apple Inc.'s artificial intelligence plans and for the $471 billion rally that has rescued the stock from the doldrums. AI is expected to be a central focus of the company's annual Worldwide Developers Conference, which begins today, and optimism has been steadily growing. Investors are hoping that new AI features will be enticing enough for consumers to pay up for the next generation of iPhones. And in corporate news, big tech will kick off the week with NVIDIA's 10-for-1 stock split and Apple's Worldwide Developers Conference, of course, which are both set for today. A vote on Tesla's Elon Musk's $56 billion pay package is also expected this Thursday. Meanwhile, chaotic moves in GameStop stock have continued to garner investor attention as the return of Keith Gill, a popular leader of the 2021 meme stock frenzy, has reignited interest. Information technology services provider Cognizant Technologies said today it has agreed to acquire digital engineering firm Belcan for nearly $1.3 billion in cash and stock. A 2-year legal battle pitching two tech titans threatens to disrupt an emerging wave of new personal computers powered by artificial intelligence. A parade of executives from Microsoft, Asus, Acer, and others joined Qualcomm CEO on stage at the annual Computex trade show in Taipei to pitch a new generation of AI-powered PCs. Tesla's controversial CEO, Elon Musk, and his massive wealth are front and center in a shareholder vote that is coming this week. 5 months ago, a Delaware judge threw out the largest paid check in history, then worth more than $50 billion that Tesla's very friendly board had given Musk in 2018. Now Musk and the board want Tesla shareholders not only to vote again to give him back those stock options, but to relocate Tesla away from the judge's estate entirely. Tesla is one step closer to launching full self-driving technology in China after it clinched an agreement with Baidu to upgrade its mapping software. Norway's sovereign wealth fund, operated by Norges Bank Investment Management, said it will vote against Elon Musk's hefty CEO compensation package during Tesla's annual meeting, which is going to be this Thursday. Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway bought around 2.57 million shares of common stock in Occidental Petroleum over the 5th and 7th of June. The company bought additional shares in common stock for more than 150 million and now owns about 250.6 million shares in the energy producer, and Occidental shares closed at $59.48 on Friday. Internal source code and data belonging to the New York Times was leaked on the 4chan message board after being stolen from the company's GitHub repositories in January of this year. At first seen by VX Underground, the internal data was leaked on Thursday by an anonymous user who posted a torrent to a 273 GB archive containing the stolen data. We do have skyrocketing over the last few years, and the housing market now could soon see some relief, with 30-year fixed mortgage rates falling under 7% this last week. According to the Federal Home Loan Mortgage Corporation, Freddie Mac, rates have dropped to 6.99%, and some are looking at the improvement as a sign more economic pressures could be easing. A new study examining the consumer habits of car owners has found that Americans are holding on to their vehicles longer than some might expect. Summer officially starts later this month, and Americans can look forward to yet another expense clearing out their wallets. A new report from the National Energy Assistance Directors Association will increase by about 8% from now until September. And as far as the cars are concerned, the study from S&P Global Mobility examined registration data nationwide and found that the average age of a passenger car on the road is 14 years, while for light truck it's 11.9 years, and the average for all vehicles is 12.6 years. Talk about a glowing reference. A new survey has found that some Gen Z applicants may not feel comfortable going to job interviews alone, so they're bringing their parents with them. According to this new survey, 26% of Gen Z respondents said they involve their parents in the interviewing process, and 31% of those said they bring them with them to their in-person interviews, and another 29% said they listen in and join them for their virtual interviews as well. Kia has announced that it recalled more than 460,000 2020 to 2024 Telluride SUVs after it was discovered that they could have a fire risk. And it looks like many Dollar General shoppers who got used to self-checkout machines will have to wait in line for cashiers again, since more than half of the chain's 20,000 stores have removed them. A Disneyland employee died after she fell out of a moving golf cart at the theme park and hit her head last week after the woman fell from the golf cart, and police arrived at the scene and found she had fallen while it was moving and had hit her head, and she was taken to a local hospital for treatment but succumbed to her injuries, according to the Anaheim Police Department. Southwest Airlines shares rose about 7% in pre-market trading this morning after the Wall Street Journal reported that activist investor Elliott Investment Management had built a nearly $2 billion stake in the U.S. Carrier. Elliott is one of Southwest's largest investors and plans to push for changes aimed at reversing the airline's underperformance. It is said that Southwest Airlines is significantly raising the fees for passengers who want to upgrade their boarding experience, already known for its unique boarding process of not assigning seats to passengers. And the earlier you board a Southwest flight typically determines what kind of a seat you'll end up in. So passengers who want to get on and off the plane faster can purchase optional services, including early bird check-in and upgraded boarding, both of which offer an earlier boarding position, a better opportunity to select your preferred seat, and earlier access to overhead bin storage for your carry-on luggage. Southwest recently and very quietly raised the fee range for both services. Early bird check-in, which allows you to get checked in ahead of other passengers, now costs $15 to $99 each way per passenger, up from the previous cost of $15 to $25. And upgraded boarding, which gives you the best available boarding position and the earliest access to seats, now costs $30 to $149 per segment, up from $30 to $80. Encore says the severe thunderstorms that ripped through North Texas last month are the worst in the company's history. The May 28th storm caused 650,000 power outages, and since then, storms have continued in DFW, delaying power restoration efforts. And among the hardest hit areas were North Dallas, East Dallas, and Mesquite. Dallas City Councilwoman Paula Blackman has called on Encore to investigate the reasons behind the extended power outages and to evaluate the company's response efforts. A local donut shop was on the brink of having to close its doors after it was robbed last Thursday in Newark, Texas. But now, thanks to the community's support, the Donut King is staying open. The owners of Donut King, which had recently reopened after a neighboring building suffered a fire, were met by early morning robbers. And the robbers were unarmed, didn't stop them from taking advantage of an older couple that owns the donut shop. And they decided to take action, took to social media to share what had happened, and issued one message to those in town ahead of the National Donut Day: buy them out and tip big. And it all started with a quick little Facebook post that they had put up the night before. Hope you guys are hungry for donuts in the morning, because we need to sell these guys out. We need to show them some small town love. And a business in Irving is partnering with the North Texas Food Bank to provide non-perishable food to people affected by natural disasters. Volunteers with Abbott Laboratories worked at the food bank to fill disaster relief packs. After divorcing Jeff Bezos in 2019, Mackenzie Scott has been showing everyone that you can and should donate to important causes, especially when you have money like she does. And this time, her latest donation is going viral on X, the social media app formerly known as Twitter. She donated $2 million grant to the Birthing Beautiful Communities, which is a DOLA program in Ohio dedicated to Black mothers, babies, and families. Cuba has recently begun offering perks to entice visitors from allied countries such as Russia and China as it struggles to revive a stagnant tourism sector still struggling to recover from the pandemic. And the first Russian oil tanker attempting to deliver crude while under U.S. sanctions made a secret cargo transfer onto another ship, a sign of the lengths to which Moscow is going to undermine the effectiveness of American restrictions on its fleet. South Africa suffers from severe income inequality, one of the worst anywhere in the world. Its unemployment rate, meanwhile, is over 30%, but its government thinks it has a solution: a universal basic income. The idea has broad political support, and the country's largest political party, the African National Congress, said recently it is committed to implementing a universal basic income within 2 years. Heightened political uncertainty in Europe is piling pressure on the euro. The common currency slid to its lowest in a month against the dollar after French President Macron and German Chancellor Olaf Scholz were trounced by far-right parties in European elections yesterday. And the euro fell to its lowest in more than a month after the French President Macron called a legislative vote in the wake of a crushing defeat in the European Parliament elections. Indian traders involved in border trade with China through the Lipu Lake Pass in Pithoragarh district have requested the central government to take up the issue of resumption of border trade through this route with Beijing. The trade route was closed rather suddenly after the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic in 2019, forcing Indian traders to return from the Taklakot Mart in Tibet, leaving behind their woolen products. 5 years have passed, but the route has not been opened. And the newly formed NDA government, in its first cabinet meeting today, decided to provide assistance to 3 crore additional rural and urban households for the construction of houses to meet the housing requirements arising out of the increase in the number of eligible families. Under PMAY, a total of 4.21 crore houses have been completed for the eligible poor families under the housing schemes in the last 10 years. Shares of 197 Communications, which owes Paytm, surged 8.7% to the day's high of 414 rupees after the fintech firm laid off an undisclosed number of employees as part of the company's restructuring. An SBI mutual fund, the largest mutual fund house, has recently achieved another milestone. The fund house has become the first mutual fund house in India to cross the 10 lakh crore rupees of average asset under management as of the 3rd of June. The cheapest Pakistan versus India ticket on the reseller website StubHub was $693, and the most expensive was $3,236. While America is not a cricketing country, a private suite for the World Cup final cost $12,488 per ticket, which is still less than the astounding $104,000 per ticket which comes under Zone Worrell Week's Walcott premium. With a capacity of roughly 6,000 seats, ticketing is big business for the World Cup, but it's just a part of the pie that consists of media rights, sponsors, event hosting, merchandising, and tickets. The Indian diaspora in the U.S. has played a major role in introducing cricket to the country on a grand scale. And about Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella and Adobe CEO Shantanu Narayan are among the executives investing nearly $1 billion in the new U.S. professional league, Major League Cricket. And the 6 teams in the U.S. are expected to spend roughly $75 to $100 million over the coming years. We do have Prince Rahim Aga Khan, who inaugurated the new software technology park in Nasirabad in Hunza. And this new facility, a collaborative effort between the Special Communications Organization and the Aga Khan Foundation of Pakistan, aims to bolster the sustainable development of Gilgit-Baltistan. Pakistan's coalition government expected to lay out ambitious fiscal targets in the 2024-25 budget this Wednesday. That's going to help strengthen its case for a new bailout deal with the International Monetary Fund. And the newly constituted National Economic Council is set to convene today to review ongoing and future investments and set targets for the next fiscal year. The oil industry is protesting the Pakistan Railway's strange tender specifications, which practically bar the procurement of high-speed diesel from local refineries and instead favor imported products at a substantial foreign exchange cost. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all I have in the financial news for you, but I do have the final segment of your program coming up next. Stay with me right here on Community Radio Networks. It is the 24th week of the 24th year of this century, and let's tell you what are the events and some of the stories that happened from the annals of history on today's date, which is the 10th of June. In Salem Village in the Massachusetts Bay Colony, Bridget Bishop, the first colonist to be tried in the Salem witch trials, is hanged after being found guilty of the practice of witchcraft. And that happened on today's date in the year 1692. The governor later in the year ordered the court to be dissolved and replaced with the Superior Court of Judicature, which forbade the type of sensational testimony allowed in the earlier trials. Execution ceased, and the Superior Court eventually released all those awaiting trial and pardon those sentenced to death. The Salem witch trials, which resulted in the execution of 19 innocent women and men, effectively ended that year. But it was the first colonist who was tried in the Salem witch trials, hanged after being found guilty of the practice of witchcraft on today's date in 1692. And in the summer of 1752, possibly on today's date, the 10th of June, Benjamin Franklin flies a kite during a thunderstorm to collect ambient electrical charge in a Leyden jar, enabling him to demonstrate the connection between lightning and electricity. Scholars debate the June 10th date, but agree it likely happened sometime in June of that year. It is one of his most famous and mythologized experiments. He became interested in electricity in the mid-1740s, a time when much was still unknown on the topic, and spent almost a decade conducting electrical experiments, coined a number of terms that are used even today, including battery, conductor, and electrician. He also invented the lightning rod used to protect buildings and ships. And that was Benjamin Franklin, who flew a kite during a thunderstorm on the 10th of June in 1752. He died at the age of 84 in Philadelphia and remains one of the leading figures in U.S. history. In an incident that some regard as the first naval engagement of the American Revolution, colonists board the HMS Gaspee, a British vessel that ran aground off the coast of Rhode Island and set it aflame. The Gaspee was pursuing the Hannah, an American smuggling ship, when it ran aground right there in Rhode Island. And that evening, an American merchant, angered by high British taxes on his goods, rowed out to the Gaspee with a number of other colonists and seized control of the ship. After leading away its crew, the Americans set the Gaspee afire. The British vessel that burned off Rhode Island on today's date in 1772. And on today's date in 1775, John Adams proposes to Congress, meeting in Philadelphia, that the men laying siege to Boston should be considered a Continental Army led by a general. The men who had armed themselves and rushed to surround British forces in Boston following the Battle of Lexington and Concord were overwhelmingly from New England. However, he, representing Massachusetts, realized that the military effort would only succeed if the British thought the colonies were united, and to this end he suggested the appointment of a Virginian, George Washington, to command the Continental forces, despite the fact that New Englanders were used to fighting in local militia under officers elected from among their own ranks. And so it was George Washington who commanded the Continental forces, the Continental Army, proposed by John Adams on today's date in the year 1775. And on the 10th of June in 1881, Count Leo Tolstoy sets off on a pilgrimage to a monastery disguised as a peasant. He had already produced his two greatest masterpieces, War and Peace and Anna Karenina, and the Russian nobleman was engaged in a spiritual struggle and felt torn between his responsibility as a wealthy landlord to improve the lot of the people and his desire to give up his property and wander the land as an ascetic. He had started giving away his possessions and declared that the public owned his works, but his wife, worried about the financial stability of the couple's 13 children, gained control of the copyrights for all his work published before 1880. But he set off on this pilgrimage to a monastery disguised as a peasant on today's date in 1881. Later in his life, he embraced Christian anarchism and was excommunicated from the Russian Orthodox Church, and in 1910 fled his home secretly with his youngest daughter, but caught pneumonia and died at a remote railway station a few days later. After 2 months of desperate resistance, the last surviving Norwegian and British defenders of Norway are overwhelmed by the Germans, and the country is forced to capitulate to the Nazis. And Nazi Germany launched its invasion of Norway 2 months earlier, capturing several strategic points along the Norwegian coast. And during the preliminary phase of the invasion, Norwegian fascist forces acting as so-called fifth column for the German invaders, seizing Norway's nerve center, spreading false rumors and occupying military bases and other locations. And Norway surrendered to Germany on today's date in 1940. And on today's date, in the same year, 1940, after withholding formal allegiance to either side in the battle between Germany and the Allies, it was Benito Mussolini, dictator of Italy, who declared war on France and Great Britain. On the 10th of June in 1944, 15-year-old Joe Nuxall becomes the youngest person ever to play Major League Baseball when he pitches in a game for the Cincinnati Reds. He threw 2/3 of the ninth inning in an 18-0 loss to the St. Louis Cardinals, and he was pulled only after one wild pitch and allowing 5 runs on 5 walks and 2 hits. And the game was played during World War II, when it became common for adolescent and older players to fill in for big leaguers fighting overseas. And Joe Nuxhall makes MLB debut at the age of 15 on the 10th of June in 1944. In Akron, Ohio, Bill Wilson and Robert Smith, 2 recovering alcoholics, found Alcoholics Anonymous, also known as AA, a 12-step rehabilitation program that eventually helps countless people cope with alcoholism. Based on psychological techniques that have long been used in suppressing certain personality traits, members of the strictly anonymous organization control their disease through guided group discussions and confessions. The organization functions through local groups that have no formal rules besides anonymity, no officers, and no dues. Anyone who wishes to stop drinking qualifies for membership. And today there are more than 60,000 local groups in the United States with an estimated membership of almost 2 million people. Other addiction support groups patterned on AA include Narcotics Anonymous and Gamblers Anonymous. In a forceful speech, President Dwight Eisenhower strikes back at critics of the Cold War foreign policy. He insisted that the U.S. was committed to the worldwide battle against communism and that he would maintain a strong U.S. defense. Just a few months into his presidency, and with the Korean War still raging, Eisenhower staked out his basic approach to foreign policy with this speech. He rejects calls for U.S. isolationism on today's date in 1953. And the 6-day war between Israel and its Arab neighbors ended with a United Nations brokered ceasefire. The outnumbered Israel Defense Forces achieved a swift victory in this brief war, rolling over the Arab coalition and more than doubling the amount of territory under Israel's control. The greatest fruit of victory lay in seizing the old city of Jerusalem from Jordan. Thousands of Jews wept while bent in prayer at the Second Temple's western wall. And that was the 6-day war that ended on today's date in 1967. At a Saigon news conference on the day he's to turn over command of U.S. forces in Vietnam to General Creighton Abrams, General Williams Westmoreland offers his assessment of past and current trends in the war. In defense of his attrition policy, he declared that it would ultimately make continued fighting intolerable to the enemy, and explained that because it was impossible to cut a surface line of communication with other than ground operations, his ban on ground attacks to interdict communist infiltration through Laos precluded the achievement of military victory, and he denied, however, that the military situation was stalemated. General Westmoreland gives farewell press conference in Saigon on today's date in 1968. His approach to the war had all but been discredited by the communist Tet Offensive, which was launched earlier that year. In the wake of the widespread Viet Cong and North Vietnamese attacks, there was a review of U.S. policy by the Johnson administration when it was decided to de-escalate the war, halt the bombing of North Vietnam, and go to the negotiating table. And he was reassigned to become the Army Chief of Staff, a post he held until his retirement from the service in 1972. In South Africa, the African National Congress, ANC, publishes a statement by Nelson Mandela, the long-imprisoned leader of the anti-apartheid movement. The message which Mandela had written in response to the 1976 Soweto uprising had been smuggled out of Robben Island prison years later under great risk. It ends with the rallying cry, "Unite, mobilize, fight on." Between the anvil of united mass action and the hammer of the armed struggle, we shall crush apartheid and white minority racist rule. That was Nelson Mandela's first major political statement from prison that is published on today's date in 1980. But of course, he had written that response to the 1976 Soweto uprising. Almost 12 million people tuned in for the series finale of HBO's critically acclaimed multi-award-winning mob family drama called The Sopranos. And that, ladies and gentlemen, happened on today's date in the year 2007. The mastermind behind The Sopranos was David Chase, a longtime writer, producer, and director for TV series such as The Rockford Files, I'll Fly Away, and Northern Exposure. He drew his inspiration for his later series from his Italian-American childhood growing up in New Jersey, where he was fascinated by gangster film The Public Enemy. And The Sopranos was an immediate hit with critics when it premiered in 1999. At the center was the New Jersey mafia boss Tony Soprano, played by James Gandolfini. The Sopranos brought to television a complex, compassionate vision of mafia life similar to those previously portrayed on the big screen by directors like Francis Ford Coppola, the three Godfather movies. In the final season of The Sopranos, Tony survives a near-fatal shooting and begins to contemplate his own aging and mortality. Meanwhile, it appears that a full-scale war is brewing between the crime families of New York and New Jersey, as they take control of New York after former boss dies in prison. In the closing scene of the open-ended finale, Tony meets Carmela, Meadow, and AJ in a diner for dinner. As soon as the screen went black, fans immediately began debating what actually happened and mourning the end of a show that many had considered the best in the history of television. That was this last episode of The Sopranos that aired on today's date in the year 2007. And you're listening to the theme song of The Sopranos opening credits in the background. Those were some of the stories from the annals of history that happened on today's date, the 10th of June. We have huge thanks going out to all the supporters of Community Radio Networks, Discount Power, Houston EB5, the Ahluwalia Law Offices, the Wyndham Hotel in Irving, Digital X-Force, Kinzer Law, My Kolachi, Ruchi Palace by My Kolachi, Shri Vimal, Vimal's Venue, Eggholic, Mystic Mandala, and Flash Brush Productions. And to update you about some of the events that are happening here in town, it is this Thursday that Hassan Sumro Entertainment presents Up Close and Personal in Dallas with a meet and greet with Shahzad Nawaz. This is happening at the Sheesh Lounge in the Colony on this Thursday, the 13th, and at 7:30. Now, for those of you that need tickets, more information, or would like to sponsor this event, please call Hassan Sumro at 972-333-4801. And this is Hassan Sumro Entertainment bringing you Shahzad Nawaz in a meet and greet in Dallas this Thursday. And on Friday from 6:30 to 9 at the Communities Foundation of Texas on Caruth Haven Lane, the Immigrant Journey Awards Gala celebrating Immigrant Heritage Month. And that is happening this Friday in honor of Immigrant Heritage Month, celebrating remarkable immigrant achievements and inspirations. Also on Friday in the evening, Badshah's Pagal Tour coming to the Curtis Culwell Center. If you haven't bought your tickets, you can go ahead and get them at go ahead and get more information first if you like at 360shows.com. This Friday, the 14th of June, Badshah in town. And organized by the Vaishnav Sangh of Dallas, the Srimad Bhagavad Gita Katha Maha Utsav, happening on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday this coming weekend at the DFW Hindu Temple, the Ekta Mandir in Irving. And on Sunday, it's from 6:30 to 7:30. World Meditation Hour, brought to you by the Brahma Kumaris. The world we live in is a reflection of who we are, and our every thought has the power to affect the collective atmosphere. So let us together make efforts to be angels of peace by spending an hour sending thoughts of healing and peace for the whole world. World Meditation Hour from 6:30 to 7:30 this Sunday, and you can register at bkdallas.org. Brahma Kumaris, bkdallas.org. A-Cube Media proudly presents Shreya Ghoshal live in concert this Sunday at 7 o'clock at the Curtis Culwell Center. And the tickets for this are available at the curtisculwellcenter.com website or at sulekha.com. Shreya Ghoshal live in concert this Sunday at 7 o'clock. And we also do have International Day of Yoga Seminar, Burnout to Balance, a day filled with activities for the body, mind, and soul. This is a free event on the 22nd of June from 8 to 4, the Collin College Conference Center on Wade Boulevard in Frisco. The Mahatma Gandhi Memorial of North Texas, in partnership with the Consulate General of India in Houston, invite you to the International Day of Yoga, Yoga for Humanity 2024, on Sunday the 23rd from 7:30 to 9:30 in the morning at the Mahatma Gandhi Memorial Plaza. And it is going to be right there in Irving, like we have it every year. The Dallas Symphony Orchestra is bringing to you a free concert, free to the public, on Saturday the 29th of June, The King's Return. As a special thanks for the community's support of the Dallas Symphony Orchestra, Morton Meyerson is proud to present this free concert featuring the incredible talent of Dallas natives, King's Return. So you can get ready to hear the infectious beats and soulful songs that capture the essence of our vibrant city, live on the 29th of June at 2 p.m. Don't miss this unforgettable summer afternoon. And on the 29th in the evening, Shankar Ehsan Loy, live in concert. Excited to present this legendary trio in Dallas on the 29th. And you get ready to be swept off your feet by Shankar Mahadevan, Ehsan Nurani, and Loy Mendonça as they set the stage on fire with their electrifying music and soul-stirring melodies. That is the Kal Ho Na Ho. The name of the concert is Kal Ho Na Ho on the 29th of June at the Toyota Music Factory. Also on the 29th of June, Nan's Vision presents Dallas's Glamorous Night with Shilpa Shetty on the 29th of June at the Grandian Event Center on Parkwood Boulevard in Frisco. For more information, you can call Nanda at 469-305-6836. Of course, we have the World Cup continuing this month, and we'll have Salim Suleiman here in town on the 3rd of July. And in July, the 2024 Texas Super Kings schedule is open, and their season against the LA Knight Riders starts on the 5th of July at 7:30 at the Grand Prairie Stadium. And you are encouraged to get your tickets early by registering for the pre-sale to ensure they don't miss out on the action after sellout crowds in 2023. Ellen DeGeneres will be in Dallas on the 10th of July. And Rohit Sharma, one of the modern greats of the game, is opening his cricket academy in Dallas on the 14th of July. You can get more information by calling Shalu at 201-245-6299. The Hitman is coming to Texas July the 14th. Cricket Kingdom Cricket Academy by Rohit Sharma setting to make its grand debut right here in Dallas. Carom Tournament, Grandmasters on the 19th, 20th, and 21st of July. And a program called Yade, singing the songs of Kishore Kumar, Lata Mangeshkar, and Muhammad Rafi on the 10th of August at the Grand Event Center. And please save the date, the 22nd of August, for U.S.-India Chamber of Commerce's Wellness and Workplace Conference. And the keynote speaker will be Nimesh Javeri, Executive Vice President and Chief Impact Officer of McKesson. We do hope you mark the 31st of August for Anand Bazaar in celebration of India's Independence Day. And we do have Brahma Kumari's sister Shivani coming to Dallas on the 8th of September from 2 to 4, as well as Mughal-e-Azam, the Broadway-style show that you saw last year, that is going to be here in Dallas also in September. And as we get close to these dates, we'll have more details coming up for you. But that is what your social calendar looks like today on this 10th day of June as we get this week started. A very nice week here because it is very, very crucial. The 24th week of the 24th day of this century. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is my show for today. For those of you who'd like to reach me directly, my number is 214-675-1754.